Welcome to the Explainer. So, tackling Homer's Odyssey can feel a little daunting, right? It's huge, it's ancient, and it's surrounded by all this heavy academic hype. But don't worry, because today we're equipping you with the ultimate survival guide to navigate this massive, endlessly fascinating world. Look, before we get bogged down in the history, let's just appreciate the absolute blockbuster elements of this epic. We're talking close encounters with a literal man-eating giant, a sorceress who actually turns men into pigs, and a long-lost king showing up out of nowhere to brutally take back his throne. I mean, come on, these are incredible action sequences. It completely shatters the idea that this ancient story is just some dusty, boring relic. It is packed to the brim with magic, revenge, and straight-up action. But, okay, here's the catch. The Odyssey is a staggering 12,000 lines long. Now, on their own, any of those crazy blockbuster episodes make for great campfire stories. But each one is just a tiny piece of this massive puzzle, spanning years of ancient Greek history, myth, and legend. So, how do we even begin to make sense of a text this colossal?
Well, to help us out, we've broken it down into a clear agenda. First up, who really wrote it? 2, stitching the story together. 3, gods, hubris, and hospitality. And finally, 4, starting in the middle. Having this roadmap of the cultural and historical territory is going to make diving into the actual book so much more enjoyable.
All right, Section 1. Who really wrote it? Unraveling the mystery of Homer. Now, maybe the most mind-blowing part of this whole mystery, this text was actually composed before the Greek alphabet even existed, in the 8th century BC. Yeah, no writing.
This really hits on a huge misconception we've all been fed. The Romantic tradition tells us this epic was written by a singular, legendary blind genius named Homer. But the messy reality? The name Homer is only mentioned centuries after his supposed era. Honestly, no one even definitively knows if he was a real person or just a legend. The poems we attribute to him, they were likely changed, tweaked, and rearranged over and over by multiple authors before someone finally wrote them down into the version we read today.
Moving on to Section 2, stitching the story together, the technology of ancient performance. So if writing literally didn't exist yet, how on earth was a 12,000-line epic recorded? Well, it wasn't. It was designed entirely for listeners, not readers.
Enter the rhapsode. These were ancient oral poets who performed these epics live. And I absolutely love this fact. The word rhapsode literally translates to stitching together. So you've got to imagine these performers as the ultimate live entertainers. They were constantly taking familiar, pre-existing material, local myths, jokes, old songs, and literally stitching them together into one sweeping narrative to hold a crowd's attention.
Still, 12,000 lines. How do you memorize that? They had an incredible mental toolkit. Step 1, employ a steady rhythmic meter. Step 2, use mnemonic devices, like repeating specific memorized passages over and over. Step 3, drop in set pieces, like a standard description of a beach or a long list of characters. It's kind of like how the chorus of your favorite song automatically triggers you to remember the next verse, right? These rhapsodes use that exact same trick to keep their place in this giant narrative.
And because they used all these familiar tales, the poem was actually often performed entirely out of order. The ancient audiences, they already knew the broad strokes of the myths. So showing up to a performance and hearing, say, episode 6 before episode 2, totally normal. It wasn't until much, much later that the order was locked into stone and became the fixed text we study today. Which brings us to Section 3, Gods, Hubris, and Hospitality. Basically, the rules of the ancient world. Now, even though the Odyssey is technically a sequel to the Iliad, you really just need a grasp on a few cultural rules of the road to survive the journey. If there's one massive, flashing red light theme uniting all these epics, it's this: do not, under any circumstances, anger the gods. The Greek pantheon is this incredibly dangerous mix of absolute divine power paired with completely petty, human-like insecurity. They're prone to wild jealousy, and they hold grudges of truly epic proportions. You definitely do not want to end up on their bad side. And that leads perfectly into the concept of hubris. This is absolutely crucial to understanding everything that happens. Hubris is that excessive pride where a human actually believes they're superior to the gods. If there is a single golden rule for surviving the Odyssey, or honestly just ancient Greece in general, it is avoiding hubris. It's the root cause of almost all the suffering in the entire poem. The second a character gets cocky and thinks they don't need divine help, things immediately go sideways.
Because the gods were so terrifying, society developed xenia. Xenia is the strict ancient code of hospitality. It meant you had to welcome any stranger into your home, offering them safety, food, and comfort. Why go to all that trouble? Because that ragged, dirty stranger knocking on your door could literally be a god in disguise, showing up just to test you. It was a very real survival tactic. And Xenia drives the entire plot. Odysseus is out there wandering the world as the perpetual guest, while back home, his clever wife Penelope is stuck playing nonstop host to a house full of terrible, unruly suitors.
All right, our final section, section 4, starting in the middle, plotting the journey. So now that you know the cultural rules, let's guide you to the actual starting line of the text, just so you aren't completely thrown off when the story kicks into gear.
You see, the Odyssey doesn't actually start at the beginning of Odysseus's travels. It starts in medias res. That's a super important literary term that just means beginning in the middle of things. Instead of easing you in, the poem drops you right into the middle of a deeply confusing, highly volatile situation.
Let's quickly map out the timeline so you know exactly where you are. Okay, 10 years ago, the Trojan War finally ends. In the years in between, Odysseus faces mishap after mishap, including, and this was a huge mistake, blinding the Cyclops son of the sea god Poseidon. Talk about hubris, right? So in the present day, the exact moment the epic opens, Odysseus is actually trapped on an island. He's been away from his family in Ithaca for 20 long years. Trouble is boiling over at home, the gods are literally arguing over his fate, and the narrative really takes off when Odysseus finally sits down to recount all those missing years to his new hosts.
And stepping back, that brings us to a pretty remarkable realization. There is this massive, glaring gap between how little we actually know historically about this specific era and the immense wealth of incredibly rich, vivid detail preserved within the epic's 24 books. It's like a time capsule.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought to chew on. Will we ever uncover the actual ruins of Troy and the exact islands Odysseus walked upon? I mean, historians, linguists, and archaeologists have spent centuries digging around, trying to find the real-world truth behind the myth. Much like its hero, this epic has made an incredibly long journey through time to reach us today. It proves that the Odyssey isn't just some old, dead poem. It's a living, breathing mystery that we are quite literally still trying to solve. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I hope this survival guide empowers you to dive in and conquer the Odyssey for yourself.